My son didn't let me meet my grandson when he was born. My wife only wanted close family there. After 3 years of silence, I won the lottery. Then, suddenly, he invited me to meet my grandson. What I did next left him pale. I'm glad you're here. Stick with me until the end, and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches, and subscribe for more amazing stories. I never imagined the happiest day in my family could also become the most heartbreaking moment in my 70 years on this earth. It was a Tuesday morning when my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door, her face lit up with excitement. "Joyce. I just saw Joshua at the grocery store. Congratulations on becoming a grandmother." Her words hit me like a blast of cold air. I stood there in my robe, still half asleep, trying to register what she had just said. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. Her smile faded. "The baby. Little Anthony was born yesterday, right?" Joshua seemed so happy, he was handing out cigars and everything. My grandson had been born 24 hours ago. And no one had told me. I somehow managed to thank her and close the door before my legs gave out. I collapsed against the wall, my heart pounding so violently it felt like it would break my ribs. How could this be happening? How could my only son, my Joshua, not tell me that his child was born? With trembling hands, I called his number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, someone finally answered. "Hello, Mrs. Clean." It was Stella, my daughter-in-law. Her tone was as cold and distant as always. "Stella, honey," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just heard the baby was born. Why didn't anyone call me? Is everyone okay? I'd like to come to the hospital." There was a long pause. I heard muffled voices in the background, Joshua's voice, I think, but I couldn't make out the words. Then Stella said, "Actually, Mrs. Clean, we've decided to keep things small. Just immediate family for now. I'm sure you understand." "Immediate family?" "I'm his grandmother." "Joshua's resting," she continued. "We just need space to bond as a family. Maybe in a few weeks." And with that, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking. In 42 years of being Joshua's mother, through his childhood illnesses, his teenage years, his wedding, I had never been excluded from anything. Until now. When my first grandchild entered the world, I was shut out. I couldn't stop myself. I drove to the hospital. St. Mary's was only 15 minutes away, and I knew the maternity ward well from visiting friends in the past. At the front desk, a young volunteer greeted me with a warm smile. "I'm here to see my grandson. Anthony Clean. My son is Joshua." She typed into her computer, then her expression changed. "I'm sorry, but the family has requested no visitors except those on an approved list. But I'm his grandmother." "That has to be a mistake. Let me check." I waited, twisting my purse strap, watching other families walk past with balloons and flowers, heading to meet their new loved ones. She hung up the phone and gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Clean. They've confirmed you're not on the list." "Not on the list." I wasn't on the list to meet my own grandson. I sat in the hospital parking lot, sobbing like I hadn't since my husband passed away 8 years earlier. The grief wasn't just emotional, it was physical, sharp, and suffocating. People walked by my car smiling, carrying teddy bears and baby blankets. I wondered how many of them were about to meet their grandchildren for the first time. How many were experiencing the joy I'd been denied? I called Joshua's number again and again. No answer. Finally, I left a voicemail. "Joshua, it's Mom. I know Anthony is here. I just want to meet him. Please call me. I love you." He never called. Not that day. Not the next. Not even the day after. 3 days later, I got a text message. "Mom, we need some time to adjust. Stella struggling. We want to bond as a family first. We'll call you soon. Soon. Such a small word. But it would haunt me for the next 3 years. That night, I sat alone in the nursery I'd set up in my spare bedroom. I'd spent weeks preparing, painting the walls soft gray, hanging star decals from the ceiling, folding tiny onesies I'd bought in joyful anticipation of babysitting my grandchild. Now the room felt like a shrine to something I'd lost. I looked over at the photo on the dresser, baby Joshua in my arms, sleeping soundly. I had been 28 then, so young, so in love with the little boy who made me a mother. And now, at 70, I was being told I wasn't allowed to be a grandmother. The cruelest part wasn't just the exclusion. It was the realization that my son had chosen it. He hadn't been pressured. He hadn't been unaware. He had stood by, silently, and let his wife shut me out of the most meaningful moment in our family's story. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning. 3 years. 36 months. 1,095 days of being erased from my grandson's life. I became obsessed with the numbers, counting them like rosary beads, hoping the math could somehow justify the ache. How many bedtime stories had I missed? How many first steps? First words? First birthdays? Anthony would be walking by now. Talking, probably. Maybe even asking questions about the world, curious, wide-eyed. And he had no idea I existed. That first year, I tried everything. I sent birthday cards, every one of them came back, stamped return to sender. I wrapped Christmas gifts that never left my closet. I drove past their house, just hoping for a glimpse, maybe he'd be in the yard, maybe I'd hear his laugh. But the windows were always shut. Curtains drawn. Their lives carefully hidden away from mine. I went to every public event I thought they might attend. The summer festival. The farmer's market. Even Joshua's company picnic. I'd linger near the entrances, pretending to shop or sip coffee, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. But it was like they'd vanished. From every place we once shared. From my world. What hurt the most was how intentional it felt. This wasn't just about being busy, or needing space. It was deliberate. By the time Anthony turned 1, I spent the entire day crying. I'd bought him a musical teddy bear, the kind that plays Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with a soft glowing light. I imagined him hugging it, his tiny hands pressing the button again and again. Instead, it sat untouched in the corner of the nursery, alongside every other unopened gift in that quiet, waiting room. My friends meant well, but their advice often made things worse. "Have you thought about a lawyer?" Margaret asked over coffee one morning. "You might have grandparents' rights." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to take legal action against my only child. The idea of standing in a courtroom, begging for court-ordered time with my grandson. It felt like surrendering to the fact that our family was shattered beyond repair. By the second year, the hope began to fade. I stopped checking my phone every hour for a message that never came. I stopped driving by their house. I even started boxing up the nursery. I couldn't bring myself to donate the toys and clothes. But the door stayed closed now. Like the chapter had been sealed, even if I hadn't signed off on the ending. The loneliness was overwhelming. Joshua had been my only child. After my husband passed, he was all I had. And now, his rejection meant complete solitude, during holidays, birthdays, and all those quiet little moments where you just want someone to talk to who loves you. Sometimes I'd sit and talk to Anthony's photo, the only one I had. A single newborn picture Mrs. Patterson had shown me on her phone after seeing it on Joshua's social media. I asked her to print it for me. She did, though I saw the pity in her eyes. Last October, on his 2nd birthday, I held that photo and whispered, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Grandma loves you more than you'll ever know. I hope you're having the most magical day." The hardest moments didn't come during holidays. They came when I least expected them. A grandmother at the grocery store helping her grandson pick cereal. Families laughing at the park. Commercials during the holidays filled with smiling faces and warm hugs. Every one of them was a fresh wound. A reminder of what I was missing. Of the love I was being denied. Eventually, I started therapy. Dr. Martinez helped me sort through the grief. She said something that stuck with me. This isn't about what you did wrong. It's about power. Control. Some people need to be the center of the story, and they see anyone else as a threat to their version of the perfect family. Stella sees you as competition, she added. Not because of anything you've done, but because of who you are, and what you represent. I understood. But that didn't make it hurt any less. The third year felt different. There was still pain, yes. But now, it was laced with quiet resignation. A new kind of grief that settles in once hope begins to fade. I stopped expecting calls. Stopped praying for Joshua to have a change of heart. And I began to live again, not as a mother or grandmother, but as me. I took up watercolor painting. I joined a local book club. I even started planning the solo trip to Ireland I'd put off for years. But at night, when the world was quiet, when the distractions had faded, I still found myself wondering about Anthony. Was he a happy child? Did he look like Joshua did at that age? Did he ever ask about his grandparents? The most painful question of all lingered like a shadow. Had Stella told him I was dead? That would have been easier, wouldn't it? Easier than admitting they'd chosen to erase me completely. The day everything changed began like any ordinary Wednesday. I was out in the garden, coaxing my stubborn tomato plants to ripen before the first frost, when Mr. Rodriguez from next door waved a newspaper over the fence. Joyce Ann. You need to check your numbers, he called. What numbers? I asked, brushing dirt off my hands. The lottery, from last night. I think you might have hit something big. I laughed. I'd been playing the same set of numbers for 15 years. Birthdays. Family dates. Including Anthony's, even though we'd never met. It was my weekly ritual. A $2 habit that bought me 5 minutes of daydreams and connection to a family I no longer saw. Still, I humored him. I dug the ticket out of my kitchen drawer, hands trembling. Together, we compared the numbers. All 6 matched. $2.8 million. I stared at the ticket. Then at the paper. Then back again. This couldn't be real. After 3 years of grief and silence. After feeling forgotten by the universe itself. I had just won more money than I ever thought I'd touch. And for the first time in years, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Then my phone rang. The caller ID lit up with a number I hadn't seen in over 1,000 days. Joshua. The phone rang 3 times while I stood frozen. Then I answered. His voice came through exactly as I remembered. And for a fleeting second, I was back in time, hearing my little boy calling me from the school office because he forgot his lunch money. Mom, he said. Joshua, I whispered. It was all I could manage. My throat was tight. My hands clutched the counter to stay upright. We heard about your lottery win. Congratulations. That's incredible. Of course Stella was there, probably coaching him through every word. Thank you, I said, my voice even. Listen, Mom. I know it's been a while. And I feel awful about that. Really. Stella and I were talking and, well, we think it's time. You should meet Anthony, properly. As his grandmother. The words I had longed to hear for 3 aching years. And they landed with all the warmth of a business transaction. I closed my eyes. The sting behind them was sharp. Have you now? I replied, keeping my tone steady. Yes. And, Mom, Anthony's been asking about you all the time. He really wants to meet his grandma. We've told him so many beautiful stories about you. The lie was so bold it made me dizzy. Anthony was 3. If he'd truly been asking about me all the time, why hadn't they called yesterday? Or last week? Or sometime in the past 1095 days? That's interesting, I said slowly. What kind of stories? There was a pause. Muffled whispers in the background. Oh, about how loving you are. How you used to make those amazing chocolate chip cookies when I was little. Anthony would love to try those cookies, Mom. My cookies. The ones I perfected over years of trial and error. The ones Joshua used to beg me to pack extra of for his school friends. The ones I'd imagined baking with Anthony, dozens of times, in the nursery that sat untouched in my home. I see, I said. And when were you thinking of this meeting? Well, this weekend. Saturday afternoon. We could swing by your place, make it really special. This weekend. For days after my name had appeared in the paper next to the words lottery winner. 3 years and 4 days after I'd been deemed not immediate family. That sounds lovely, Joshua, I said. I surprised even myself with how calm I sounded. I'll make sure the cookies are ready. That's fantastic, he said. Anthony's going to be so excited. We're all excited. It's going to be like a real family reunion. A real family reunion. As if the last 3 years had been some kind of extended vacation from being related. After we hung up, I just stood there. In the kitchen. The winning lottery ticket still sitting on the counter. The numbers blurred through the tears in my eyes. But these tears weren't from joy. And they weren't from grief. They were from clarity. For 3 years, I'd tortured myself trying to figure out what I did wrong. Replayed every conversation. Every birthday party. Every memory. Looking for the exact moment I'd lost my son. But this phone call told me everything I needed to know. I hadn't lost Joshua 3 years ago. I'd never truly had this version of him to begin with. The son I'd raised, who used to call me every Sunday just to say hi. Who remembered my birthday without reminders. Who knew the difference between love and leverage. The man who once drove 4 hours through a snowstorm because I mentioned feeling lonely. That Joshua had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Or maybe this was who he'd always been, and Stella had just given him permission to show it. I called Dr. Martinez and scheduled an emergency session. How do you feel about seeing them again? She asked after I explained the situation. Angry, I admitted. But also curious. I want to see what kind of performance they'll put on. I want to meet my grandson, even if it's under these circumstances. And what are you planning to do about the money? That was the question I'd been avoiding. When I first saw those matching numbers, my immediate thought had been a generous future for Anthony. College funds. Family vacations. A beautiful home where he could visit his grandmother anytime he wanted. But that was before Joshua's call. Before the desperation in his voice. Before the obvious coaching from Stella in the background. I'm not sure yet, I told Dr. Martinez. But I know one thing, I'm not going to be anyone's ATM. Not even my son's. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I baked chocolate chip cookies. The rhythm came back instantly, measuring flour, creaming butter and sugar, folding in chocolate chips. It was all muscle memory. As the first batch baked, filling my kitchen with the scent of childhood, I made a decision. They were going to get exactly what they deserved. The cookies came out perfect. Golden brown, with soft centers, just the way Joshua had always liked them. I packed them into the same blue tin I used for his school lunches, still dented from years of use. Then I picked up the phone and called my financial advisor. Margaret, it's Joyce and Klein. I need to discuss some options for my lottery winnings. Specifically, I want to know about charitable donations, and how fast they can be processed. By Friday night, everything was arranged. The cookies were ready. The house was spotless. My plan was set. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Saturday afternoon arrived with the kind of autumn weather that belongs in a greeting card. Golden leaves drifting across the front yard, a crisp bite in the air that used to make me excited for holiday gatherings. I was ready an hour early, sitting by the front window with the blue cookie tin on my lap, watching for Joshua's car. When the silver SUV finally pulled into my driveway, my heart stopped. There, in the back seat, I saw Anthony. Even from a distance, I could tell, he had Joshua's dark hair and what looked like his father's stubborn chin. He was bigger than I'd imagined. No longer the baby I'd held in my mind for 3 years, but a little boy now, full of opinions, personality, and 3 whole years of life I'd missed. Joshua stepped out first. He looked exactly the same, aside from a few new lines around his eyes. He was 31 now, but the weight of whatever they'd been carrying had aged him. Then Stella stepped out from the passenger seat, and I barely recognized her. The Stella from their wedding, 7 years ago, had been pretty in a quiet, unassuming way. Soft brown hair. A genuine smile. This Stella was transformed. Her hair was now platinum blonde, styled in a way that clearly cost a small fortune. She wore a designer outfit, one that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. But it was her face that struck me. She looked around at my modest house with barely concealed disappointment, like she'd expected to pull up to a mansion. I opened the door before they could knock, pasting on a warm smile. "Joshua," I said, opening my arms. He hesitated, just for a moment. Just long enough for me to notice. Then he stepped into the hug. He felt thinner than I remembered. He smelled like expensive cologne, not the Old Spice he'd worn since high school. "Hi Mom, you look great," he said with the same forced enthusiasm I'd heard on the phone. "Stella, honey." I turned to my daughter-in-law. She gave me a polished smile and a quick, awkward hug. "Mrs. Klein, it's so wonderful to see you again. You look exactly the same." A polite lie. I knew I looked older. 3 years of grief and silence had etched new wrinkles into my face, streaked gray into my hair. But I appreciated the effort. Then Joshua opened the SUV's back door and lifted Anthony out. My grandson was beautiful. Not just grandmother-biased beautiful, genuinely stunning. Joshua's dark eyes. My late husband's nose. He wore a tiny button-down shirt and khakis, dressed like a little adult. He clung to Joshua's shoulder with the shyness that made my heart ache. "Anthony, this is Grandma Joyce," and Joshua said gently. "Remember we told you about her?" Anthony peeked over Joshua's shoulder, thumb planted firmly in his mouth. He didn't say anything, just stared, wide-eyed. "Hello, sweetheart," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "I'm so happy to finally meet you." He buried his face into Joshua's neck. "He's a little shy at first," Stella said quickly, though her tone made it sound like that was somehow my fault. "He'll warm up once he gets to know you." Gets to know me. As if I were a stranger they'd just met. Not the grandmother they'd kept from him his entire life. We moved into the living room. I watched as Stella's eyes scanned the space, taking stock. Outdated furniture, family photos, modest decorations. I could practically see her tallying up the value of everything. Wondering where the lottery money had gone. "Can I get anyone something to drink?" I offered. "I made fresh lemonade. And I have chocolate chip cookies, Joshua's favorite recipe." "Cookies?" Anthony suddenly lit up, squirming in Joshua's arms. "Anthony loves cookies," Stella chimed in. "Don't you, baby? But just one, okay? We don't want to spoil your dinner." I brought out the blue tin, the same one from Joshua's childhood lunches, and opened it slowly. Anthony's eyes widened. "Go ahead, sweetheart," I said gently. He reached out with his small hands, took a tiny bite, and his whole face lit up. "Good," he announced, crumbs spilling onto his spotless shirt. "What do you say, Anthony?" Stella prompted. "Thank you, Grandma," he replied obediently, and my heart nearly burst. For the next hour, I watched my son and his wife perform the most elaborate charade I'd ever seen. They admired my house, complimented the decor, made cheerful small talk about the weather and the neighborhood. Stella gushed about how much Anthony had been looking forward to this visit, while Joshua nodded and added how sorry they were it had taken so long to arrange. But their eyes kept drifting. Stella asked pointed questions about my investments, whether I'd considered upgrading to something more spacious. Joshua mentioned how costly childcare had become, how they were thinking of buying a bigger home, how Anthony would need a college fund soon. They weren't being subtle. It felt like watching two actors who'd forgotten their lines, trying to improvise their way through a scene they hadn't rehearsed. The clearest moment came when Anthony spilled juice on his shirt. Without thinking, I leaned in with a napkin, instinctively, the way any grandmother would. "Don't," Stella said sharply, then caught herself and softened. "I mean, I've got it." "Thanks, though." She scooped Anthony away from me so quickly he began to whimper. And just like that, I saw the truth behind the last 3 years. It hadn't been about needing space. It wasn't about bonding or adjusting. Anthony had been kept from me because Stella saw me as a threat, someone she couldn't control. And Joshua had let it happen. When they finally left, promising we'd definitely do this again soon, I stood in the doorway and watched them drive off. Anthony was crying in his car seat, likely overtired and overwhelmed. I could see Stella gesturing animatedly toward Joshua as they pulled out of my driveway. I knew exactly what they were discussing. They were making plans for my money. Inside, I picked up the phone and dialed my financial advisor. "Margaret, it's Joyce and Klein. Let's move forward with those charitable donations. All of them. I want everything transferred by Monday morning." After I hung up, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the blue cookie tin with just 2 cookies left. Anthony had eaten 3, smearing chocolate on his fingers, giggling at the funny faces I made. For one brief, beautiful hour, I had been a grandmother. It was going to have to be enough. The phone call started Monday morning. "Mom, it's Joshua. Just wanted to thank you again for Saturday. Anthony hasn't stopped talking about Grandma and those amazing cookies." I smiled despite myself. "He's a sweet boy, Joshua. He's got your eyes. Doesn't he?" Joshua said. "Listen, Mom, Stella and I were talking, and we'd love to have you over for dinner this week. Maybe Thursday?" Anthony keeps asking when he can see Grandma again. The lie rolled off his tongue effortlessly. Anthony was 3. If he'd been asking for me after one visit, why had I been absent from his life for 3 years? "That sounds lovely," I said. "Should I bring anything?" "Oh, just yourself. And, Mom, we've been thinking about Anthony's future, you know? College is expensive. We just want to make sure he has every opportunity. Maybe we could talk about that when you come over?" There it was. The real reason for the invitation. Tuesday brought another call, this time from Stella. "Joyanne, hi, I hope it's okay I'm calling. I just wanted to tell you how much Saturday meant to all of us. Joshua's been in such a great mood since reconnecting with you." Reconnecting, as if the distance had been mutual. "It meant a lot to me too, Stella. I'm glad. You know, I felt so guilty about how distant we've been. I think I was just overwhelmed being a new mom, and maybe a little protective. But seeing you with Anthony, you're such a natural grandmother." The words should have comforted me. Instead, they felt practiced. Polished. Like she'd rehearsed them in the mirror that morning. "Anthony's lucky to have such devoted parents," I said, choosing each word. "We try," she replied. "Speaking of which, Joshua and I have been talking about expanding our family, maybe giving Anthony a sibling. Of course, with daycare costs and all, it's a big decision financially." By Wednesday, the pattern was clear. Every conversation, whether from Joshua or Stella, somehow circled back to money. Expenses. Future plans. They were laying the groundwork, building a case for my supposed generosity. But that evening brought something unexpected. I was at the grocery store, picking up ingredients for the dinner I'd agreed to cook at their house, when I heard familiar voices from the next aisle. I peeked around the corner. It was Stella, shopping with another woman I didn't recognize. Both had carts full of items. "Can't believe how perfectly it worked out," Stella was saying. "The timing was just incredible." "What do you mean?" the other woman asked. "Joshua's mom winning the lottery right when we needed it most. I mean, what are the odds?" Stella replied. "It's like the universe knew we were about to lose the house." My blood ran cold. "Lose the house? Are things really that bad?" her friend asked. "Worse than bad," Stella said. "Joshua's been out of work for 6 months, and we're 3 payments behind. I've sold half our stuff on Facebook Marketplace, but it's not enough. We were days away from filing for bankruptcy when that lottery story broke." My grip on the shopping cart tightened until my knuckles went white. "So you think she'll help?" the other woman asked. Stella laughed, a cold, calculating sound I'd never heard from her before. "Are you kidding? She's been desperate to be in Anthony's life for years. All we had to do was wave the carrot in front of her, and she practically begged to be let back in. That's kind of manipulative, don't you think?" "It's survival," Stella snapped. "Besides, what's she going to do with all that money anyway? She's 70, living alone in that little house. At least this way, it goes to family. To her grandson's future." The other woman hesitated. "What if she doesn't give you what you need?" "Then we'll get creative," Stella said without missing a beat. "Joshua found her financial advisor's contact in her phone book, Margaret something. We can always reach out directly. Say it's a family emergency. Or maybe suggest Anthony stay with Grandma for a while if we lose the house. You know, really pull on her heartstrings." They moved toward the checkout, their voices fading. But I'd heard enough. "The old lady will never see it coming," Stella had said. "She's so lonely and desperate for family, she'll do anything to keep us around." I stood frozen in the canned goods aisle, surrounded by soup and pasta and jars of pickles, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed, again. They weren't just after my money. They were planning to manipulate me. To use my love for Anthony like a crowbar. And if I didn't comply, they'd take him away from me again. Worst of all, Joshua knew. He had to know. About the debt. About the plan. The son I raised, the boy I loved without condition for 31 years, was part of this. I left my cart behind and walked out of the store in a fog. Back at home, I sat in the kitchen staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call and confront them. But a bigger part of me wanted to see how far they'd go. Instead, I called Margaret. "Has anyone contacted you about my lottery winnings?" I asked. "Actually, yes," she said. "A young man called this morning, claiming to be your son. He mentioned a family emergency and asked about accessing funds right away. I told him I couldn't speak about your finances without written authorization." "What kind of emergency?" "Medical bills. Possible foreclosure." He sounded desperate. I assumed you'd asked him to call. Medical bills. So they'd already embellished the story. "Margaret, I need you to add a password to my account," I said. "Don't discuss anything with anyone, family or not, unless they know it." After we hung up, I walked through the house and saw it all with new eyes. They'd been here Saturday, taking inventory. Stella had asked casually about my investment plans. Whether I was considering a larger place. Now I understood why. They weren't planning to ask for help. They were planning to take it. I picked up the photo of Anthony from the mantel, the one Mrs. Patterson had printed for me 3 years ago. He was days old in that picture. So small. So innocent. Unaware of the grown-ups who'd one day weaponize his smile. He deserved better. Better than parents who used him as leverage. Better than a father who stood by and let it happen. And I deserved better than being treated like some foolish, lonely old woman who could be tricked with a few fake smiles. Dinner on Thursday was still on. But not the way they expected. That evening, I arrived at their house with a homemade lasagna and a carefully rehearsed smile. The neighborhood was nicer than I'd imagined. Big houses. Trimmed hedges. Manicured lawns. All of it spoke of money and appearances. Now I knew it was all a lie. "Mom." Joshua greeted me warmly, almost too warmly. Come in, come in. Anthony's been asking about you all day." The house was beautiful, but sterile, like a model home. Matching throw pillows, coordinated artwork, candles that had never been lit. I noticed boxes stacked in the corners. Probably items Stella planned to sell. Then Anthony ran to me, wrapping his arms around my legs. "Grandma. Did you bring cookies?" "Anthony, what do we say?" Stella chided gently, though she was beaming. "Please, can I have cookies, Grandma?" "After dinner, sweetheart," I said, ruffling his hair. "But I brought something else." I handed him a small wrapped gift, a picture book about grandmothers. He tore it open with the glee only a toddler can muster. "What do you say to Grandma?" Joshua prompted. "Thank you." He hugged the book to his chest and looked up at me with Joshua's dark eyes. "Will you read it to me?" "Of course, baby. Maybe after dinner." Stella appeared beside me, smiling. "Joyanne, you're just so generous. Anthony's lucky to have such a thoughtful grandmother." Lucky. The word hung between us like smoke. Lucky to have a grandmother they kept away for 3 years, until they needed a bank account. Dinner was a production. Stella had gone all out. China. Expensive wine. A meal that didn't match the financial crisis they'd described. "This is all lovely," I said, glancing around. "You both have such beautiful taste." "Thank you," Stella said, glowing. "Though honestly, we've been thinking of downsizing. This house is more than we need. And the expenses. Here it comes, I thought. Houses really are a burden," I said lightly. "Repairs. Taxes. Insurance." Joshua nodded, right on cue. "Exactly. And with Anthony getting older, we've been thinking more about his future. College is just so expensive. You know, we just want to make sure he has every opportunity," Joshua said. "Of course. Family is everything," Stella added. They exchanged a glance, a flicker of silent celebration. I could practically see them congratulating themselves on how smoothly things were going. After dinner, while Anthony flipped through his new book in the living room, Stella poured coffee. Joshua cleared his throat. "Mom, there's something we need to talk to you about." I set my cup down and gave him my full attention. "What is it, honey?" He hesitated, then said, "We're really happy you're back in our lives. Anthony's already so attached to you, and, well, Stella and I realize now how wrong we were to keep you away." "We were overwhelmed," Stella added quickly. "New parents, you know. But we see it now, what we missed. What Anthony missed." "I appreciate that," I said, careful not to let my voice betray me. Joshua took a breath. "The thing is, Mom, we're in some financial trouble. I lost my job 6 months ago. We're behind on the mortgage." "We hate to ask," Stella cut in, "but after your lottery win, we were hoping you could help us. Just until Joshua finds work." I looked at them, these two people who stole 3 years from me. 3 years I could have had with my grandson. And now they wanted to take my financial security too. "How much do you need?" I asked. They glanced at each other again. "Well, to catch up and stabilize, maybe $200,000. I know it's a lot, but it would just be a loan. We'd pay you back once we're back on our feet." $200,000. Nearly a third of my winnings. "That is a lot," I said. "Let me think about it." "Of course," Joshua said quickly. "Take all the time you need. It's just, if we lose the house, I may need to take a job out of state. And that would mean Anthony would be far from his grandmother, Stella finished sweetly. It would break his little heart. There it was. The threat. Delivered with a sugar-coated smile. I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I stepped onto the back patio and took out my phone. I called Margaret. Is everything in place? I asked softly. Yes, she said. All transfers were finalized this morning. The documentation will reach the organizations by the end of day tomorrow. Thank you, Margaret. You've been incredible. When I came back inside, Anthony was curled on the couch, fighting sleep, still clutching his book. I sat beside him and gathered him into my arms, breathing in that small boy smell of shampoo and innocence. Grandma, he whispered, half asleep, will you come see me again? My heart cracked. I love you so much, Anthony. Never forget that. Joshua and Stella watched us, smiling, the kind of smiles that tally emotional currency. I gently set Anthony down and turned to face them. I've made a decision about the money. They leaned forward, anticipation written all over their faces. I'm not giving you any of it. Silence. Stella's smile faltered. Joshua blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what? Stella asked. I said no, I repeated. You're not getting any money. Joshua went pale. Mom. I don't understand. We're family. Anthony is your grandson. Yes. And for 3 years, you kept him from me. Not because you needed space. Not because of new parent stress. But because Stella decided I wasn't good enough to be his grandmother. That's not true, Stella said weakly. Isn't it? Then explain why you only called me after the lottery announcement. Why every conversation this week has turned toward money, expenses, or Anthony's future. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. See this? I showed them the zero balance. Every penny is gone. It's been donated to children's charities. Stella gasped. Joshua's face turned gray. You're lying, she whispered. Call Margaret Stewart at First National Bank if you want. Though she won't speak to you. I made sure of that, after Joshua called her behind my back. Joshua sank into a chair. Mom. What have you done? We needed that money. We're going to lose everything. No, Joshua. You lost everything 3 years ago. When you chose to cut me out of Anthony's life. This money was never yours. And neither was my love, something you don't get to bargain with. Stella's mask cracked completely. You selfish old woman. What kind of grandmother punishes her grandson out of spite? The kind who refuses to be manipulated, I said calmly. Anthony deserves better. Better than parents who use him as bait. Better than a father who helps manipulate his own mother. I glanced at Anthony, still sleeping peacefully, unaware his world was shifting again. I'm leaving now, I said. And this time it's on my terms. I walked toward the door, but Joshua called after me. Mom, please don't do this. We can fix it. I turned once more. Joshua, you had 31 years of my unconditional love. And you threw it away, for someone who sees family as a financial opportunity. I hope it was worth it. As I drove away, a feeling I hadn't known in years washed over me, peace. The next morning, I called my travel agent and booked a cruise to Alaska, something I'd always dreamed of doing. I signed up for pottery classes at the community center. I adopted a senior cat from the shelter, an orange tabby named Marmalade, abandoned like me, just looking for a quiet place to live out his golden years. I changed my phone number and gave it only to the people who truly loved me. 3 months later, Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door. Did you hear? She said. Joshua and Stella lost the house. Moved across the country. She didn't know where. I didn't ask. On my mantle, I keep one photo of Anthony, taken during our single afternoon together. He's smiling, chocolate chip cookie crumbs on his cheeks. Sometimes I wonder about him. I hope he's happy, safe, loved. But mostly, I focus on the life I've built. A life where love isn't conditional. Where family isn't transactional. Where a 70-year-old woman finally learned that the bravest kind of love is knowing when to walk away. I'm free now. Now, I'm curious about you. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever experienced something like this? Comment below, and while you're here, I'm leaving one more story I think will surprise you. Thanks for watching.